So long as things are proceeding according to the laws, to the constitution, and as I said, because we have this choice of prime ministerial candidates, including one from the current leading coalition party, it doesn't have to be a crisis. I think it's only when Parliament begins to find difficult choosing somebody, or in the worst case, I guess if there is some kind of deadlock where the parties could not agree, then there will be some kind of crisis. Then again, the People's Party, the opposition, has already made its offer that it would not allow that to happen. It would be willing to elect somebody without having to join the government, on the condition that that leader proceeds with the constitutional amendments and call early elections. So at the moment, I see no reason why we would hit a dead end, that there would be a deadlock that would then lead to some kind of extra constitutional crisis.
So in the same vein, though, in terms of resigning and paving way for a new election, dissolving the parliament, you actually refused to resign in 2010. So what I'm wondering is, what's the difference?
The demand was for me to dissolve the House.
Yeah.
And I actually set a date, giving them reasons why we needed a bit more time. But that offer was refused. And in the end, I also dissolved the House once the constitutional amendments were completed. So, I mean, I kept my word. Actually, I said at the beginning of my term, quite clearly too, that I wasn't going to stay the full term, and I kept my word.
Was that because you knew that you weren't going to stay a full term, or because it's not usual?
Because I felt that I came into power under rather exceptional circumstances. I didn't win the elections. The party that did win had two prime ministers who were subsequently disqualified, and there was a defection from the leading party. And I felt that at the time there were twin crises, if you like, one concerning the impact from the global financial crisis and the other from the internal politics. And I felt that if we could somehow resolve those to a certain extent, then it would be a good time to go back for the people to have their say.
So on the same note, you've said many times in previous interviews and after coups, the power to be returned to the people.
Yes.
And again, reiterating what you just said, you rose to power through non-democratic methods, or a combination of non-democratic methods.
Well, I'm not sure if that's the right characterization.
Okay, boycotting the election.
Well, I have to ask you whether Seta came into power according to democratic.
No.
Well, it's probably clearer because you have the Senate who were not elected having a say. But in my case, it was all MPs deciding that it was time for change within that parliament. It's something that's not unusual in a number of parliamentary democracies in the world, where the second biggest party had a shot at forming a government. When my name was put up for parliament to vote, the person who was competing with me was from a party even smaller, and the biggest party decided not to field their own candidate. So it's a decision of the majority of Parliament, but because, as I said, it's under exceptional circumstances, it wasn't a direct mandate from the people, if that's what you're after. Therefore, I had offered that I wouldn't stay the full term.
I wouldn't say that I was after a direct mandate for the people. What I'm more curious about is whether or not boycotting the elections and the ensuing, you could call them crises, were part of a democratic function.
Around the world, boycotting of elections usually happened when political parties decided that there was something wrong with the electoral process. And I think we were proved right, because the Election Commission at that time was later found guilty of not being impartial. And the boycotting of elections, I know at that time people accused of contributing to the coup. But you should also remember that after the boycotted elections were found to be illegitimate, a new one was called. And we didn't boycott it, we participated. and then the coup happened. So it wasn't because at the time of the coup, any party was boycotting elections. We were all participating in it.
I think the reason that I brought up boycotting elections too is because you had planned to boycott the election again in 2014, right?
Yeah, we boycotted again. And again, you could go through the sequence of events. I have to say that the election, the boycotting in 2014 were rather different from the earlier one. The earlier one, actually, nobody had been familiar with this idea of boycotting elections. But in 2014, I have to say that unlike the previous occasion, there was hardly any debate within the party. And when we decided, it's all up to all the MPs in the party. The first time, there was almost 50-50 split. We debated the whole day about whether it would be the right thing to do. But in 2014, I was myself a bit surprised that it was almost unanimous. Maybe only one or two people disagreed. So the boycott then took place. But, the last minute before the coup happened, I was trying to say to the Pheu Thai party what I've been saying to a lot of other people before that we should try to prevent a coup. And one way to do that was maybe if they had resigned from the prime ministership, there could be some arrangements for a transition towards elections. Again, that was turned down by the Pheu Thai party, Kun Chatthaporn, who was then the leader of the Red Shirts at the time, subsequently revealed that he believed that in the end even Kun Thaksin wanted the coup to happen. So it certainly wasn't me. I remember talking to the Pheu Thai people and said, look, you need to step back a little. We are not demanding any kind of power. We just wanted a transitional arrangement before we go back to elections where everybody, the public that is satisfied that there will be fair elections, meaningful elections, so that we can take this forward. And I again should point out to a number of countries where when there are crises, maybe not exactly the same kind of crisis, it isn't unusual for people from political parties to step aside for some kind of transitional government in order to take things forward.
It seems that a lot of what you say and a lot of your work, for better or worse, has been somewhat of a power struggle between you and former Premier Thaksin Shinawatra. How much of your decision making is based on that relationship that you have?
No, I think you have to separate our role in the opposition, which is naturally something that was part of your job to offer an alternative point of view. But a good reason to say that my decisions when I was in power was not based on this is because a number of policies in the Thaksin government were either continued or improved or in some cases stopped because I consider them on their merits. So for instance, his greatest achievement is the universal healthcare coverage. Actually what we did was to try to plug in all the financial gaps that we've left behind, which the government of Kun Suriyut actually was probably the first to try to plug that gap. And also actually improved on some of the aspects of that project. The OTOP carried on with certain adjustments, but policies that I felt weren't beneficial were stopped. So everything would be treated on its merit, not because it was initiated by Thaksin or Thaksin supported government. An example of a policy I stopped was the rice pledging scheme, because already we identified that as something that would cause a lot of damage to the fiscal position as well as opening up opportunities for corruption.
So do you see this current moment as the end of what some would call the Shinawatra political dynasty?
Well, if you call it a dynasty, it hasn't obviously been as strong as it was 20 years back. But the Pheu Thai is still an important force in politics. Actually, Pheu Thai could have built on its achievements and it's always held back by its tie to the family and allow itself to be dominated by the family. We saw in the case of Prime Minister Sethar, who initially didn't appoint Kun Vicheth as minister, but then I guess under subsequent pressure, he gave in, which led to his removal. He was then replaced by somebody who is opposite part of the family. Many people feel that she doesn't have the experience and obviously has been dominated by her father through a series of public statements as well, not just what's going on behind the scene. And they haven't been able to deliver according to the expectations that people, including their supporters, have had. So the strength 20 years ago was all about a good economy. The last couple of years, we've hardly seen an improvement. And with latest controversies surrounding how the border issue or how relations with Cambodia have been handled, that seems to have dealt a big blow to the Pheu Thai party in terms of its popularity.
Is there a Pheu Thai party? The idea of Pheu Thai party, is it at all independent of the Shinawatra family? Because you're going back and forth on this.
Is there...
You're talking about the Shinawatra family, but you're conflating it a bit with the Pheu Thai party.
Well, because I think Pheu Thai has an opportunity in terms of building on its achievements in the past. And I'm saying that they have missed those opportunities because they have given way to the requests or demands of the Shinawatra family, which is leading it to its decline.
The People's Party, a progressive movement, won the 2023 elections, but have failed to get ahead since. Why?
Well, I think they're making a lot of progress. Everybody that you talk to in Thailand, if you ask them who's going to win the next elections, I think everybody would probably say that the People's Party is in the best position to get the most seats. So it's not as if they haven't made progress. They have. The problem is people still find it hard to believe that other parties will join its government, and therefore the idea that they can win an absolute or outright majority right now might be just a little too far, but it's gaining support. They're winning a lot of battles on ideas, so that even if they're not in government, they have been able to dictate some of the agenda even in parliament. So you might think about the equal rights marriage law, deregulation on alcohol.
That's not what I'm thinking about, to be honest. To the point. Do you support...
Well, that's the progress that they've made,
okay,
right? But of course, they would clearly want to be in government. And that's still quite a tall order in the sense that they either have to win an outright majority, or they're going to have to be a bit clearer about what kind of parties would join them in a coalition.
It seems that the core of one of their major issues has been, and this is my question to you, do you support the progressive movement's bid to reform Section 112 by the parliamentary process?
You know, the talk of reforming Section 112 began in my government, but the problem, I think, has been the differences in tones. Because despite what we said and what we did as a first step, which was to identify then, to give reassurance to the police, to the Attorney General that they needed to pursue some cases against academics who were expressing their points of view, against foreign journalists, and charges were dropped, differentiating those kinds of cases from what would be a clear Section 112. Now, I did that. Nobody ever accused me of not being loyal to the monarchy. I think the problem with the movement in recent years has been its tone and the way it's been conducted. And I thought that the amendments that they proposed, which led to the disbanding of the Move Forward Party, I thought those amendments were rather poorly written. And because of certain provisions, allow people to interpret it as undermining the monarchy, rather than reforming the section to improve upon the enforcement of the law. We should be able to discuss these issues, and I think some amendments may be appropriate, but there certainly wouldn't be the same kind of amendments that we saw the future forward and the move forward submitted.
So in terms of the things that you did as Prime Minister and then things that we are still legislating in Parliament, do you feel that people charged with Section 112 should have been included in the current amnesty bill?
Again, my suggestion to the committee on amnesty before they drafted the law was where you sort out this issue on its own, and that is to say that it would make sense to begin to look at some cases and again say clearly that this was most likely an abuse or misuse or motivated cases, and therefore I think these people should be eligible to apply or be granted an amnesty, whereas there are some clear violations of 112, and I think that for them that the route should have been for them to seek a royal pardon.
Okay, switching gears.
So I need to say this, and you know, people can be frustrated these days. Why not give a short answer, yes, no? I think that's the real problem now with a lot of issues here in this country. A lot of these problems need solutions which are moderate, detailed, not jumping to one side or the other. And unless we have the patience and the willingness to discuss this in detail, we'll keep going around in circles, where we jump from one extreme to another and find that we can't get the right balance.
Former Premier General Prayut Chan-o-cha could become the next Prime Minister. Do you support this?
Well, my own interpretation is that he shouldn't be qualified because he has already taken up the role of Privy Councillor. But I don't know how they would interpret the law. In the past, some of the interpretations I disagreed with. For instance, when somebody submitted that he should have been disqualified last time because he was a state official. I thought he was clearly a state official, but the court determined that he was not. But notwithstanding that, Prayut would be a choice that the Pheu Thai need to decide whether they wanted to accept. The reason being that the People's Party will accept it, so Prayut can only head a coalition with Pheu Thai as a majority coalition partner. Now, Pheu Thai had already, to the eyes of a number of people, sort of betrayed the voters by setting up the current configuration or the previous configuration of government under Khan and subsequently had some time. Would they have the stomach to do it again? They might feel that if it is necessary to hang on to power and to have a rather steady and stable government through the next elections, they may feel it's worth it. And if they decided to do that, and if the court decided that that was legal, then, you know, that's where we would probably be heading.
Do you think that we would be able to stabilize the situation as it is?
You can stabilize the government. But when you say stabilize the situation in the country, I would just have to say that for me, we don't want any extra constitutional changes, and with the majority of parties not willing to go to early elections, all that we can ask for is for a government stable enough to complete its term. Having said that, I am one of those people who have been frustrated for quite some time now that the current configuration and the way government is set up, certainly in this parliament, simply cannot meet the challenges that the country faces in terms of the structural issues that need to be addressed in order to lift us out of this economic trap that we fell into for quite some time now. So it is frustrating, but because the way things have been evolving, the best you can hope for is, well, maybe the next elections will give us a government that can have the strength and the mandate and the willingness to tackle the issues of Bangkok.
And at the appearance of it, a lot of people feel that having a military general being in the government again is not what they want. So my question to you is, do you see an end to military interference or involvement in Thai
politics? I think we have to make a difference between somebody who is no longer part of the army you can't just disqualify somebody because of his own job. But if he, meaning General Prayut, comes in under the circumstances that we discussed, he needs to be treated as a politician, and he needs to take the kind of accountability and takes on the responsibility of any other politician. No exception to
Should the military be politicians?
Well, if people decided that it was appropriate, so for instance, if you look at Indonesia, they decided if somebody from the army should be their president, it's the people's choice. So, as I said, now we have a parliamentary system. If the majority of MPs decided that they should choose him, because he was also put up as a prime ministerial candidate in the elections, then we would have to respect that choice. As I said, I don't have much expectations or hope for the rest of the term of this parliament, because I don't think any serious issues that the country is facing will be tackled.
Okay, so speaking of which, you regularly give inconclusive answers about your future in politics. You recently told me that you'd only return as a Democrat. Is the current Democrat Party salvageable?
Well, whoever inherits the party after the current leadership goes is going to have a monumental job of recovering the party and getting it to gain popularity. But I've been clear right from the start in my political career that I will only have one political party, and despite all its faults today, if it were possible for me to get back, it would only prove that the Democrat Party is still an institution of some kind, where membership, ordinary membership, can determine its future. It does not belong to a person or a group of people.
So is it salvageable?
I think there is still some basic support for what the Democrats stood for. We began as a liberal democratic party. We're still part, well, I say we, I'm no longer a member, but the Democrat Party, and certainly under my leadership, was a very active party in the family of political parties in this region, which is called the Council of Asian Liberals and Democrats. We take seriously the issue of corruption, and we believe in the basic working of free market economy, and the government has the role of addressing social justice. I think there is still a market for that, but because of the things that the party had done over the last few years, many people felt we had departed from those principles. If we could convince that we really do adhere to those principles, I think it's still possible to pick up some support. I have no illusion that it would be as powerful a force as it once was, but at least if we could recover it to that stage, maybe it's up to the next generation of leadership to then carry on.
So to be clear, some of your former allies have already defected.
Back.
If you came back.
Not if I came back, but if the current leadership is gone, and they believe that whoever comes and runs it would stick to the principles that I've mentioned, I think there will be many, many people rejoining the Democrat Party. But having said that, we all have political burdens in the past. So the real challenge, of course, is getting fresh people in and tapping into the support of the younger generations.
The household debt to GDP ratio in Thailand is at about 90%, which ranks quite high.
We're in the top 10.
Yeah. So does this metric indicate an economic crisis now or in the near future?
It certainly highlights one of the symptoms of Thai economy. And I think it's important to recognize, too, that we're in the top 10, as I said. But not only that, if you look at the other countries in the top 10, they're all rather rich countries, and their debt profile would be mostly about mortgages for houses, assets, and so on, whereas quite a lot of the substantial portion of our household debt would be actually consumption loans. So getting to grips with this particular problem is tricky. On the one hand, I think it's not so difficult for people who had to depend on maybe loan sharks or high interest loans to just have an opportunity to do business. For them, you can almost refinance them in some way. But the more difficult issue is the consumption loans part. There, I think in the longer term, nothing will be financial literacy for most people so that they can manage finances.